This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Everything you didn't learn in high school biology. That's the tagline of a remarkable new documentary challenging some of our most deeply held assumptions about biology, gender, and sexuality. It's called Second Nature, narrated by the Oscar-nominated actor, the author, Elliot Page, and directed by Drew Denny. The film explores a growing body of scientific research documenting the extraordinary gender fluidity and sexual diversity found in the animal kingdom. From same-sex penguin parents to sex-changing fish, to pregnant seahorse fathers, to primate societies where traditional notions of dominance and gender roles simply don't apply. This is the film's trailer.
There are approximately 8.7 million living animal species on Earth. For centuries, we have been told that when it comes to gender and sexuality, all these millions of species follow a certain set of rules. But what if this narrative fails to capture the full spectrum of life's diversity?
Homosexual behavior in nature is one of the best-kept secrets. It's absolutely everywhere.
Not only do many species illustrate homosexuality and gender multiplicity, they also illustrate sex transition.
Biologists now know sexuality is fluid and that all of that is normal.
I don't know any species where homosexual sex or gender non-conforming is a taboo or cannot be done, except when it comes to humans.
There have always been scientists who have been willing to stand in opposition to the existing worldview, and there are consequences for that.
I was completely unprepared as a scientist to deal with this.
We learned what we learned in school, and we want to believe that it's true, and it's messy to now say, oh, it wasn't really that way.
I realized it can't be the people who are defective, it's got to be the science.
If we understand same-sex behavior better, we're also going to understand different sex behavior better. We're just going to understand the sexual lives of animals better.
There is endless diversity in nature, and the old stories we've been taught deserve a second look.
That's the trailer for the new documentary Second Nature, the film partly inspired by the trailblazing work of trans evolutionary biologist Dr. Joan Roughgarden and her groundbreaking book, Evolution's Rainbow: Diversity, Gender, and Sexuality in Nature and People. The film arises amidst ongoing attacks on transgender rights, censorship of school curricula, and attempts to ban LGBTQ affirming books. But the film is less interested in politics than the wild, rumpus, raucous world of animal, sexual, and gender diversity. But perhaps there's a lesson in there for us humans, too. For more, as we mark the end of Pride Month, we're joined now by the film's director, Drew Denny, and executive producer and narrator, Elliot Page. Elliot Page is an Oscar-nominated actor, producer, and author of his memoir, Page Boy. Drew Denny, Elliot Page, welcome to Democracy Now! Elliot, talk about the significance of this new documentary, Second Nature, why you got involved with it.
Gosh, I mean, I got involved because I was so moved by it and found it so affirming as a trans and queer person. I mean, quite frankly, I felt very silly for not assuming this all to be true already. And what just was so exciting to me was how well made it was, of course, how informative it was, but also just how funny and expansive. And it's one of those things that even if I wasn't involved, I'd be telling everybody to see. So, yeah.
I want to go to a clip from the film Second Nature. This is about seahorses.
Perhaps one of the fiercest challengers to our assumptions about sex roles is the seahorse. It's the males who take on one of the biggest chores of procreation, pregnancy. After a mating ritual, female seahorses deposit their eggs into the male's pouch where he fertilizes them. About 30 days later, he gives birth to up to 1,000 baby seahorses.
Pregnant male seahorses. Drew Denny. Just a little introduction to this incredible film. Talk about how you got involved and why you directed this.
Thank you so much. First of all, it's a huge honor to be here. I've been so inspired by your work, and you're one of the reasons I went into journalism and became a documentarian, so thank you. I decided to make this movie because I grew up in Texas being told that females are naturally inferior to males and that queerness is simply unnatural. In my public high school biology class, students were invited to walk out of the class if they were offended by evolution. But none of us girls were asked if we were offended by sexual harassment and assault that we survived at school, and none of us queer kids were ever asked if we were offended by the relentless bullying that we faced every day. So it wasn't until I grew up and read Dr. Joan Roughgarden's book and learned about gay penguin dads and birthing seahorse dads, for example, and genderqueer chimps and our other closest relatives, bonobos, who are matriarchal, that I finally felt in my body for the first time that I belong here on Earth just like anybody else. And it may sound silly that it's the queer animals that did that for me, but that's what it took. And I love that you shared the seahorse dad clip because I think it's just a great example that proves that all of these binaries we've been told are just natural law are completely false and made up by humans.
Let's go to another clip from Second Nature about reef-dwelling fish, the bluehead wrasse.
Bluehead wrasse can change from female to male. There's one male in the group, and the same day he dies, the largest female starts to change her behavior. She stops making estrogen and starts making androgens. Ovaries that produce eggs turn into testes that make sperm. Then that fish is the male of the group and can procreate with the remaining females. So if you've been diving on a coral reef, you have seen sex-changing fish. And the phenomenon of sex change in animals is not rare.
Bluehead wrasse, clownfish changing sex from male to female, albatross, penguins, and swans parenting in same-sex pairs, bonobos, as you said, Drew, who are just as closely related to us as chimps, as matriarchal, having same-sex sex every day. Talk about this and the groundbreaking trans scientists that inspired this.
Yeah, I mean, Joan Roughgarden and all of this and investigating she's done and discovery has just led to, I think, one of my favorite lines in this documentary, something she says in terms of looking at nature as if it's some sort of cis heteropatriarchal structure is absurd, and that this, gender binary that we've created is nothing but a quaint little myth. And I think, her work and this documentary really, really shows that what we have been taught in school in regards to these structures, men being superior, women being inferior, submissive or what have you, it being this, heterosexual existence is just completely false. And I think what's so wonderful about this documentary is it really illustrates, why that information has been so suppressed, and how important it is for us to all learn about this, and how it's only expansive and exciting, all of this information.
I want to go to the golden lion tamarins.
The golden lion tamarins are an amazing species for many reasons. This is a species where females have harems of males. So we call that polyandry, yes, where one female has a number of males as a mate and they live together in a group. She mates with all the males in the group. All of them have a chance to sire offspring.
So the males are unrelated?
They're unrelated, yeah.
Yeah.
we think it might have evolved because this is one of the few primate species where females have more than one baby at a time. They tend to have twins. Each baby is 25% of the mom's body weight at birth, so there's no way she can carry them around herself. So the babies travel with dad, and they just come to mom to nurse after they're born.
So in order to produce the brood, you need males.
Yeah, and they're playing a really important role here as caregivers.
This is a fabulous case. Polyandry, it's not an incidental byproduct of anything. It's a full-fledged social system.
That's right, yeah. This kind of polyandrous species, it really helps us to understand the variety of mating systems.
So that's Dr. Joan Roughgarden and Dr. Amy Parrish. Drew Denny, talk about the backlash against these scientists.
So unfortunately, each of the scientists in the film has faced severe backlash from their research. So Dr. Amy Parrish, who you just saw speaking, was one of the first people to publish that bonobos are matriarchal. And people lambasted her. They said she had a feminist agenda. And they suggested that it wasn't matriarchy, it was in fact strategic male deference. Now, one of the reasons Amy hypothesized that bonobos were matriarchal is because the females commit acts of violence against males, including biting their penises in half. And she asked, what kind of strategy is that? Not a good one. And that no one has ever suggested in a patriarchal species that it's strategic female deference. We're just assuming that patriarchy is the norm, and anything other than that must be a really brilliant strategy by the males.
I want to go to one more clip, and this is the clip about baboons in the new documentary, Second Nature.
There's a very famous scientist from Stanford University named Robert Sapolsky, whose groundbreaking research on baboons in Kenya was featured in a National Geographic documentary. Baboons are known to be quite violent, particularly the alpha males. Robert had a situation where he was in the field and the baboons in his group discovered a garbage pit behind a hotel. And so the baboons are really excited about this wealth of free food. But it was only the roughest, toughest males who could feed in there because they were all fighting with each other over access to this food. And so all of his alpha males were the ones who were feeding there and not the other baboons. Unfortunately, they caught a human disease by eating the half-eaten food. They caught tuberculosis, which is fatal for baboons. And so the baboons were in the really unique situation of losing all of the alpha males at once. What were left were the low-ranking males and the females. What happened next was absolutely revolutionary. They forged a new society. It was a society where males didn't have to fight as hard to get in. Males were nicer to females. It's much more peaceful, it's much more calm, less stress. They're all getting along much better. Today, many years later, it's still organized in the same way, so that new social system lasted.
A clip from Second Nature as we wrap up in these 30 seconds. Elliot Page, what you want people to take away from this. And I should say that you're going to be here starting on Friday at DCTV, our beloved Firehouse Cinema, where Democracy Now! Used to broadcast from, with all sorts of scientists doing Q&As.
Gosh, well, I mean, I hope this film for everyone, but, you know, for queer and trans people right now could make you feel less alone in this world and more a part of this world when we're told we're, you know, not natural or something's wrong with us or what have you, and to learn about all this information that's been, you know, purposefully kept from us. And
we have to leave it there, but people got to see the film. Elliot Page, Oscar-nominated actor, producer, author of memoir Page Boy, and Drew Denny. Second Nature. I'm Amy Goodman. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. As we continue with part 2 of our conversation about a revolutionary new film. It's called Second Nature. It's narrated by the Oscar-nominated actor, Elliot Page, the author of a memoir, Page Boy. executive produced as well, and directed by Drew Denny. I want to go to another clip from Second Nature. This is on monkeys.
We're really focused on studying their cognition. How's the view? Okay. One of the studies uses these puzzle boxes. We're trying to get into the inner minds of these monkeys.
Proboscis approaching the platform, plataforma 2, in contact with the apparatus. Proboscis reach in with the pull door, reach in and grab the banana. He got his reward.
How does an individual who solves a box really well, how does that translate to the way they move through their social world? Do they make better choices socially? And then we can maybe get at questions of individual variation in their cognition. Maybe all capuchins are really good at this, but let's say one individual is a particularly good problem solver amongst subadult males. How does that translate to his natural world? And I think that relates a lot to sexual behavior as well. Is there variation in how it happens? Do certain individuals engage more in it than others? We know that behavioral flexibility is critical. We need to be able to solve problems in changing environments. That's hugely adaptive. We know that. And yet, sexual flexibility has been seen as something that isn't, in fact, adaptive. But if you can change your behavior to different environments, if you can make different types of cognitive decisions, why wouldn't it be adaptive to have a lot of flexibility in your sexual behavior?
So there is a scientist talking about capuchin monkeys. Drew Denny, tell us about Dr. Marcela Benitez.
Dr. Marcela Benitez is a fantastic scientist studying capuchins in Costa Rica, and she's one of the people who's experiencing the downside of the cuts to sciences in this administration. And her research is truly groundbreaking, and also she's groundbreaking. As an out queer person and a Latina scientist, she's one of the few people that her students can see as a mentor if they identify in those ways as well. And she knows from her experience of working in Ethiopia what it's like to be studying in a place where you can't be out, where it's not safe to just live your truth, and how that actually kicks a lot of people out of science because they feel too afraid to do the field research. There's actually a scientist who we filmed with who then pulled out of the movie because she works in a country where it's illegal to be gay, where it's punishable by death. And she—
Might that be Uganda?
And she said, you know, I'm so sorry, I want to be a part of this, but I'm afraid. And I said, well, of course, we'll pull your footage out. We were supposed to follow her there. And it's just terrible to think that this information is being hidden because people are afraid to have their research shut down or to even be harmed or killed simply for being queer.
I'm fascinated by the beginning of Dr. Marcela Benitez that we didn't hear, but I watched in the film about what she first observed and what she was told when she observed it.
Yes, so she observed 2 male geladas engaging in a quite obvious act of same-sex sex. And she was shocked because she had never been told that that could happen. In fact, she had been taught, like most people, that that couldn't happen, that it doesn't happen. And she looked over at her field guide and he said, yes, sometimes this happens. And she quotes him all the time because she said, he didn't say, oh, don't look at that, or that's weird, that never happens, we shouldn't, document that. He just said, yeah, that happens. And it completely changed her outlook because she realized that all the things she'd been told couldn't happen in nature or didn't happen in nature actually happen around us all the time. They've just been censored and kept from us.
And again, she's a scientist at Emory. I'm fascinated that so many of these scientists are women, and they are not in the majority of the scientific establishment in this country.
It's true. All the scientists in our movie are women, queer, trans, BIPOC, and immigrants. They identify in at least one of those ways. And the first thing I looked for were experts. They are the most credible experts in these fields. They happen to identify in those ways. And I think the reason that they ended up being the people in our movie is because they come from a different perspective. And so even though they were taught, like Amy was taught, that females could not bond with each other if they weren't related, She's a woman and a feminist, and she knows, like, the feminist movement is trying to make unrelated females bond and advocate for each other like sisters. So when she saw female bonobos engaging in that behavior, she called it what it was, instead of trying to pretend that it's strategic male deference.
Well, we've got the clip on the bonobos. And again, for people who don't know what bonobos exactly are, that they're as close to us as chimps.
Yes, bonobos are 98.7% genetically identical to humans, as are chimpanzees.
Let's go.
So this is a group where the alpha female is named Jill. It's easy to tell who's in charge because they will immediately acquire the best food, and other individuals have to make exchanges with that female in order to get the food. Bonobos aren't more of a close relative than chimps. Both of them are equally our closest living relative. Yeah, I do. We last shared a common ancestor about 6 million years ago with both. Bonobos and chimps are each other's closest living relative. They last shared a common ancestor 2.5 million years ago. And their next closest cousin is the human being. We're 98.5% genetically identical to each of them. So here's two females engaging in some aggression and sex. So they're having a conflict and resolving using sex. That's called GG rubbing, or genital rubbing. We just observe ventral dorsal, so back to front. And now it's front to front.
What surprised you most, Elliot? You're narrating this film, you're watching all the footage, and what were you most touched by?
I guess what surprised me the most was just how much information there is and evidence that really shows gender and sexual diversity in nature, and how little of it I knew. And I was probably just I was so moved by how it shows the expansiveness, the intelligence, and how adaptive nature is, like how exciting the thought of queerness in nature is. And, you know, and I think I was definitely affected by the backlash that you see these scientists have to deal with and take on, whether it's just, you know, people coming at them publicly or currently losing grants or what have you, when they're doing this like groundbreaking essential work that hardly anyone's ever done before. And yeah, that was, you know, sort of my big takeaways.
I want to go to a final clip from Second Nature.
There are approximately 8.7 million living animal species on Earth. For centuries, we have been told that when it comes to gender and sexuality, all these millions of species follow a certain set of rules. We have been told, for example, that they can be divided into two rigid categories: male and female. We have been taught that males are naturally promiscuous, aggressive and dominant, driven by an insatiable urge to compete for the favor of females. Females, on the other hand, are depicted as passive and coy. They are uninterested in sex, but acquiesce to males in order to pass along the best genes to their young. In the story we've been told, sexual activity is a strictly heterosexual endeavor. Anything different has been dismissed as maladaptive and unnatural. But what if this narrative fails to capture the full spectrum of life's diversity? What if the animal world is teeming with variations and adaptations that transcend the stories we've been taught?
That title, Second Nature, Elliot Page, what does that mean to you? That was Elliot, by the way, who is the narrator of the film, Second Nature.
I guess when I think of I don't know, second nature. I think of instinct, and I think of trusting our inner knowing and knowing who we are. And I think of, nature existing in this way that we try to project all our, human baggage on, and that has been, wrong and incorrect, and led by, oppressive structures that uphold a cruel and violent status quo that serves a very few. And, to me, second nature and leaning into our inner knowing of who we are and how we connect with all living beings on this planet, I think to me is my takeaway from it. Yeah.
And Drew Denny, you talk about clownfish changing sex from male to female, and back again? What happens?
So clownfish can change sex from male to female. The bluehead wrasse can change sex from female to male. There's many species who can change sex, sometimes in one direction, sometimes back and forth throughout their lives. It's pretty incredible, and it's not at all rare. So if you've been diving on a coral reef, as Dr. Joan Roughgarden says, you've seen sex-changing fish.
Explain. You got to go further.
Sure. So with the bluehead wrasse, for example, if the male of the group dies, then one of the females will spontaneously change sex. So her ovaries become testes, and then he becomes the male of the group, and the females mate with him or make babies with him. So it's a brilliant strategy, and as Jeff Goldblum said in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. So I don't know why anybody would have thought that didn't happen in the real world, because it's actually happening all around us.
I wanted to end, Elliot, by talking about your book, your memoir, which came out a few years ago. I was at Town Hall when you did one of your Q&As, and I gave your book to a dear friend. If you can talk about your growing up, put your interest in this film and narrating this as you talk about learning about what was considered anomalies in the animal kingdom to just facts of life for animals. What it meant for you to learn this. Your memoir is called Page Boy. Why you find it so affirming.
Yeah, well, thank you, Amy. Where I grew up, there was no... I wasn't seeing queerness around me,
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia in the 90s and early 2000s, and I wasn't seeing examples of queerness, and if it did come up, it was usually coming up in a negative way, and I wasn't growing up in an affirming household at the time, and so I did feel lost and alone, or and conflicted, and it led to a lot of, honestly, negative consequences in my life. That shame and that discomfort. And a documentary like this, which, as Drew explained, was so much inspired by her experience where she was younger when she grew up, was to make something that would allow people to see that we're part of this world. Queer and trans people have always been here, will continue to be here. There's nothing wrong with us, and I think, being a part of this doc feels very healing, and I think it's for people, regardless of identity, of course,
You write in Page Boy, something in me knew that I was transgender. It was something I'd always known but didn't have the words for, wouldn't permit myself to embrace. You were only 6 when you asked your mother if you could be a boy. What did your mother respond at the time? And talk about what it meant, as you write in your book, that you felt viciously closeted as you grew up.
Yeah. My mom said, which I think at the time she had no context for what this, she would have never heard the term transgender, I think she said, oh, hon, you can't, but, you can grow up to do anything a boy can do, and that. And then later, really, any conversation with my mom in relation to queerness was pretty shut down and not something she, well, I'll just say it frankly, wanted her child to be. she's completely different now. We actually watched this documentary together when I popped up for Mother's Day, and that was a really sweet experience to have. And also just like a woman growing up in New Brunswick, born in the 50s with those strict gender roles and, you know, all of the things this documentary I think goes into that speaks to my mom and her experience on this planet. But yes, I felt viciously closeted, especially in my early 20s, entering sort of the Hollywood world. And it's, you know, I think it has really incredibly negative impacts on one's life.
Did you become an actor because you wanted to be somebody else?
You know, I think there was most certainly, like, I kind of became an actor accidentally at, you know, 10 years old, but I think that it was definitely, I would imagine, an escape a bit from how I was feeling. And
I mean, you're an interesting actor. You're an incredibly celebrated, successful actor.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, I think it probably allowed an escape for me, and then it became something that, you know, really helped and saved me in some ways, and also something that became complicated in my life and my relation to it, and how I was presenting myself to the world.
You write in Page Boy, the world tells us that we aren't trans, but mentally ill. That I'm too ashamed to be a lesbian, that I mutilated my body, that I'll always be a woman, comparing my body to Nazi experiments. It's not trans people who suffer from a sickness, but the society that fosters such hate. How do you see this all now? And what do you say to young people who feel the way you do?
Yeah, I mean, as we're seeing this, the attacks against the trans community are getting, you know, worse, and that, you know, rhetoric that is spread and lies and awful propaganda about our community that's can be really, really damaging, of course. You know, for me, it's about really, really holding on to back to like an inner knowing and not allowing that noise to interfere with this joy I feel connected to in my life. And I hope for anyone who's sort of, you know, struggling in this time and the headlines and just to know like that you're, you know, not alone and loved and celebrated by so many, and try and block out the noise from, you know, absolute vile losers who must just be so profoundly uncomfortable with themselves they can't handle that someone could get to a place that I think, you know, that, you know, trans people do get to, which is a level of self-acceptance and understanding that I think is really beautiful and profound.
And did you ever think, as we wrap up, that going through the pain that you went through, you could be a role model to so many?
Gosh, I mean, I think, you know, people have been such role models to me to get me to this place. So to know if in existing and sharing my story in any way helps people feel less alone, then, you know, that really does mean the world to me.
Elliot Page, Oscar-nominated actor, also celebrated author for his memoir, Page Boy, also executive produced and narrated the new film Second Nature, which was directed by our other guest today, Drew Denny. It's going to be at DCTV at the Firehouse Cinema starting this weekend. And I'll end with Drew talking about the scientists you're going to have over the week. I can't believe I'm going to be away with another film this weekend in Rhode Island, but the minute I come back Sunday night, I'm going to be at our beloved Firehouse Cinema downtown in Chinatown.
We'd love to have you at a screening. We'll have Q&As every single day that we're there. Elliot's doing a Q&A, Dr. Marcela Benitez, Dr. Patricia Rodriguez-Brennan, Dr. Joan Roughgarden will be there. We'll have members of our filmmaking team as well, so people will be able to ask all the questions they might have. And I just want to say also that the research in our film has been used and demonstrated to reduce self-harm and suicide among LGBTQ youth. So though it might seem like a silly subject in the film, it's very fun and funny. There's actually a serious mission behind it, because I know what it's like to be told that there's something wrong with you and you don't belong on planet Earth, and it might make you think that you have to look for a way out. But the truth is that we all belong here, and I hope that the more people that know about this, the fewer people feel like they have to look for a way out.
Opening June 26th at the Firehouse Cinema at Downtown Community Television. Drew Denny, director, and Elliot Page, executive producer and narrator of the new documentary, the revolutionary documentary, Second Nature. To see part one of our discussion, go to democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.